Hello, everyone. I'm Bartek Igielski. I'm a lead front-end developer at SNOW.DOG. And of course, I have to start my presentation with the Marius face because that's the rules. That's the rules. It will not be yet another talk about replacing whole front-end stack, as I used to say it on the other conferences. Why? Because we already have the initiative of the PWA studio, which is going on in the Magento, and it's a really cool project, and we believe it, but it will take some time. So until it will be released, we need to do something with our current front-end stack. And probably the most important thing about it is making it faster. So why we should make it faster? The performance is the happiness of the customers. If the customers are happy, the conversion is higher. So if the conversion is higher, we will have more money to play in funny games in work, and the clients are also extremely happy. So how should we basically measure the performance? There is a lot of tools, even created by the Magento community, which help us somehow measure if our store perform well or not. But for my presentation, I choose the Lighthouse. It's a tool created by Google Chrome team. And it's a tool that will warn your developers that something possibly is wrong with your implementation, and will give you some kind of advices how you should fix it. And that's the structure of the Lighthouse. It starts with the bunch of gatherers. So basically, your page is loaded, the gatherers are doing their job, creating the artifacts. The artifacts are using to create the audits, and the audits in the JSON format are used to generate the report. And the report is divided to four parts: the PWA, performance, accessibility, and the best practices. And then we can see this report in example as a HTML page. How the Lighthouse work itself, why it's really cool tooling. It runs on the clean Chrome instance, so it basically doesn't matter if you have any extension installed or disabled something. It always spawns a fresh new instance, and this instance is run in the debug mode. So it's like a really separate thing. It emulates the size of the Nexus 5X, because we always have to test as a worst case scenario. So the mobile devices are the worst in this case, because they are the smallest one, the slowest one, with the flackiest network connection possibly. So we also have to throttle the CPU. It depends how fast is your device, but usually the smartphone is like five times slower than your development machine. And the network is throttled to the slow 3G, so which means that basically every network request took extra 500 milliseconds, plus the bandwidth is slowed down to, as far as I know, 2 megabits per second. How to use the Lighthouse? The first, the easiest one is to just open the Chrome developer tools and go to the audits panel. And you can find the Lighthouse. But in the time I was creating the slides, the version of the Lighthouse built into the Chrome developer tools was kind of outdated. I'm not sure if it's still a case, but we can imagine that the Chrome development process took some time. So until they decide to update the Lighthouse, it took, I don't know, a month or something to release actual version of the Chrome. So the results might be vary, so be careful. The second one is to install the Chrome extension, and it will add you the button to trigger the Lighthouse on basically any page. And it's a pretty safe way because the extension have own update process. It's not related to the Chrome itself. And the third one, the most powerful and recommended for me for every developer, is to use the CLI. And the CLI package is based on the Node.js. It's the most powerful way because you can decide what your report should look like, what parts of the application do you like to check. And that's how the report itself looks like. As you can see, on top we have the scores. The scores is individual for every part of the audit. So we have the progressive web app, performance, accessibility, and best practices. Each group have the points that are not so good and the advices about how to fix it. And also in the performance, we have the screenshots of how the page is loading. So we can see that it took like 30 seconds to basically render something on the screen. And then on the bottom, we have the first meaningful paint, first interactive, and the full interactive. And it's in the millisecond. So basically, we can quickly know that in which part of this of the application something is wrong, and how long does it take to render the page, or when the page is interactive to the user. Sorry for the quality, but it should look better. But I will tell more than is on the slides. So, which config in the Magento basically perform best? So, should we enable the merging? Is the merging still a thing in 2017 or not? Should I enable the bundling? The minification is okay or not? You know, I don't have time for the minification. So the quick answer, always enable minification and merging because it saves data and reduces number of requests. Even on the HTTP2, it's good to keep the number of the requests low because on the really slow networks, basically every request, it's extra, I don't know, 200, 500 milliseconds. So if you are doing like 5 requests instead of 1, it will be probably slower. It also saves data because if you combine few files together and then run gzip on top of it, or any other basically lossless compression algorithm, it will be more efficient. To bundle or not to bundle? And the quick answer, it's not to bundle. Of course, I'm talking about bundling built in to the Magento 2 core, not any other third-party-like solutions. So when you are not bundling, we have the performance scores of the 53. When we are bundling, it's a 49. But most important stuff is going right there. So when we bundle, the consistent interactive time is way lower because most of the JavaScript code is loaded and executed on the beginning of the page loading. So it makes this time a little bit shorter, but it shifts the time which we have to spend on the page loading to the beginning. So it blocks the page rendering. So as you can see, without bundling, we have to spend like 700 milliseconds on the scripts that are blocking the render. But when we bundle, it increased to almost 4 seconds. So that's the difference. And what's the starting point for the further optimization that I will present you? I was using the Magento 1.8, 2.1.8, with the sample data and the Luma team. Minification and merging was enabled, and I was using the HTTPS, HTTP2, and gzip because in my opinion, is a kind of standard, and you shouldn't do anything different in this case. And the base performance was the 53. The first meaningful paint was in like 3.5 seconds. The first interactive around the 7 seconds, and the consistently interactive around 19 seconds. And we have a lot of opportunities right there. So we have off-screen images, which postpone the initial render by almost a second. We have the render blocking style sheets, which also postpone is like about a second. The render blocking scripts, and the advice to serve the images as a WebP. So let's do this. First step was, of course, to create a new team, because that's how we should deal with any kind of customization. So I took our SASS blank team as a base, and the Frontools to compile it easier. And this team is available on the GitHub as an open source project, so basically you can jump in, check the code, or contribute, or whatever. And the first thing we should do with the stuff we already have into the Magento is to annihilate any kind of render blocking resources. So in short words, we have to basically make everything asynchronous. Let's start with the style sheets. And people who probably could not use the asynchronous JavaScript, or they're saying it's wrong or something like that, are right now totally pissed off. But it's a really good thing. As you can see, we can save here like 800 to the 100 millisecond up to 1 second, just by making our style sheets asynchronous. So how to do this? I use the real preload tag. And because it's not supported in that way I would like to use it, I need to remove the style sheets from the layout file, and then add the same style sheets with my custom code into the PHTML of the root. I know it's not the best practice, we should do this in the layout, but there was no way to do this. So we are making a new link tag with the href to our style sheet, and then we are adding the real preload as a style. And there is a tricky part, because by default, preload only get the resource, do not process this in any way. So we have to trick the browser to say, okay, when you will get this file, let's change the real to the style sheet. And in this moment, the browser will start processing our style sheets, and our style sheets basically become the asynchronous thing. And because of the real preload, it's not available in every browser, we need to load the polyfill. And of course, remember that every type of JavaScript code you are adding to your store, it should be asynchronous. There's really no reason to make it synchronous. Next thing that we have to change in our code base because of the asynchronous style sheets is to inline some CSS. Why we should do this? Because that's how the asynchronous thing works. We don't know when it will be loaded, so there is a possibility that our page will be rendered basically without any style sheets. So it will be like a white background, the blue links, something like that. So there are a few ways to trick the browser to render the page in the way that user will get something normal, not that something is broken. So we need to create something like a critical CSS or the above the fold CSS, which will contain the styles that will be necessary for the initial rendering. So in example, we should extract from the styles like a header or some kind of scaffolding and based typography styles. So it's kind of tricky. I don't think that there is a way to automatically generate the critical CSS. Maybe if your system is really well designed and the code is nicely done, it is possible, but for the Magento 2, I tried various tools, and basically all of the time I end with like 20, 25 kilobytes of the critical CSS, where the limit of the critical CSS itself, it's like 14 kilobytes, because that's how the packages in the HTTP protocol works. So I do something different, which I will show you in a minute. But at all, it's really important stuff, and you can save here a lot of time. So it's there is, if you serve the really nice critical CSS on the page, you basically can make your page to load in a 1.5 second with the first render, even on the 3G on the really slow device. So I talk about this one. That it's not that easy to do. So I decided to create some kind of loader that will hide that our page does not look so good. So that's basically the whole loader. It's simply the gradient with the animation from the left to right, and it will hide basically anything on the page. And then we need to hide this loader when the pages, when our style sheets are loaded. So I added something like this. So on the onload event on our style sheets, we are adding the class name to our body element, and the class name is loaded. There is some simplification because thanks to the asynchronous way of loading, we are not sure that when this event will be fired, our DOM will be ready. So we need to check the DOM, if the DOM is ready first, and then add this class. But you know, it's like 2 lines more. Next really important thing about making our pages faster, it's to lazy load all of the images. So load them asynchronously. And you can save here up from the 500 up to 1.5 seconds, and depends on how many images do you have on page, how much they weigh, etc. So I'm using for the lazy loading the lazy sizes library, and it's as simple as just add the library in the layout, of course, with the async flag, and then we need to change the way how we are loading the images basically in every place in the store. So every source tag in the image or the picture, or basically whatever you are using, you need to replace it with the data source, because we need to trick the browser to not download the images. Because if there is an image without the source tag, the browser will not download anything. But we also need to tell our lazy loader, like, okay, there is an element that should be lazy loaded when it starts to be visible. So the lazy loader, what is lazy loader doing? It just when the element becomes visible in the viewport, it's changed the data source to the source, and the browser will know that this element should be downloaded. But there is not only way to deal with the lazy loading, because we can combine a few technologies together and serve the low quality image as a default. So in example, when we have like a 500 by 500 image, we can scale it down to 50 by 50, load this, add some CSS to blur out this image to hide the scaling up artifacts. And then when the elements will start to be visible, replace it with the high quality image. So it's a really nice technique, but it should be used at, in the correct way. Basically, it's not a good way to replace every image with the low quality placeholder, because it will add some weight to your page at all. So it will be probably good for the home page when you're expecting to load some images really fast. So at all, there is a link with the detailed description of how how you can implement the low quality image placeholders in the various ways, various techniques. So go there and you will know way more than I said right now. Next thing is to avoid the synchronous JavaScript, which is a pretty common case in many third-party extensions, that they're just loading the JavaScript through the layout, and they think it's a good way, but it's not. The next thing about making things faster is to prefetch some resources. So in this case, I'm prefetching the JavaScript libraries. In this case, it's a jQuery UI, knockout, and underscore. And what's the difference between the prefetch and the preload? Prefetch only fires when the browser is idle. So if the main thread is have some free time, it will spend it downloading these resources. So if we know that, I don't know, at the bottom or on the next page, or there is some resource that probably the user will need, we can add it in the head like as a prefetch, and the browser will know that if there is if I have some free time, I will get it, and the overall speed will be better. And you can save here up to 300 milliseconds. So if we annihilate every not asynchronous resources on our page, we have to focus on reducing the payload, because it's really important stuff to load less, only load in the proper way. So the first thing is to merge the style sheets. I know it may be considered as not a good practice, because in Magento 2, by default, we have 2 or 3 style sheets, and they are loaded conditionally, depends on the media query. But it's turned out that more requests, even if they are smaller, and some of them are not fired on every device, took more time than just loading the one bigger style sheets with better compression. So in this place, you can save also up to 300 milliseconds. Next thing where you can save a lot of data is to optimize the images, especially optimize the images uploaded by your clients directly on the CMS pages, etc., where the Magento core is not processing these images in any possible way. So it really depends on the how well the store is maintained and how well your clients are educated about dealing with the images optimization. But really think about it that you shouldn't load, like, I don't know, 2 times more, 2 times wider image without any reason, and to use as low quality as it's possible. And you can also try the WebP. I don't have anything more about it. I just know that in WebP you can save like 30–40% comparing to the JPEGs. And it's also really cool because WebP is like it's combining the good things about JPEGs and the PNGs, because you can have the lossy compression with the transparency. The next thing about the images is to use the responsive images. Why it is crucial? It's related heavily to the downsize and loading the right size of the image for the right device. So if you are on mobile, you probably don't need the full HD size banners. So it will save you like 50 to 70% of the data. It's also a really nice thing for the marketing team because they can load different content for different device size. So, in example, the banners on the homepage can be in a different aspect ratio. So instead of loading them 60 by 9 like on desktop, they can use the square, and it will look good also on the mobile. The next thing is to reduce number of the fonts, or probably even do not load any fonts because the fonts are not the content. And it's not really necessary to use any external fonts because you can use this one, which are built into your system. Of course, there are cases when there is a brand book and you have to load some kind of font. But if you really have to, always use the VOV2 format because it's the lightest one. And remember that the font loading, it's not as simple as adding the font directly to your CSS or your HTML code as a link or something like that, because it's extremely slow. So I'm not going to focus on explaining how the different techniques of the font loading looks like, because as you can see, this part of the graph, it contains various methodologies of loading the font, how the font loading flow looks like. So there is really lots of way to deal with it. So I would recommend you to read this extremely long article about dealing with the fonts, because it's really important stuff. The next thing will be, it's kind of obvious, but not so obvious for the third-party extension developers, that do not duplicate the JavaScript libraries. We don't really need 3 other versions of the jQuery on the page. There is no sense to make it this way. It just adds more weight to the page and nothing more. So how the results looks like after all of this optimization process. So as you know, we started with the score of the 53. Right now we have the 68. The first meaningful paint, it's almost 2 seconds faster. The first interactive is over 2 seconds faster, and the consistently interactive is also about 2 seconds faster. So basically, we have the first meaningful paint in less than 2 seconds, which is kind of nice, especially for those people who consider it that the Magento 2 front end is extremely slow. And as you can see also in the possibilities part, we have only one. We have the reduce render blocking scripts. And it's related to the architecture of the front end in Magento 2. Basically, all of the required JS stuff have to be loaded in the head as a synchronous resource, because we have a lot of the JavaScript inside the templates. So basically, every Magento init or datamage init should be processed by this code. And there is technically a way to, I don't know, scrap all of this data and put it in the footer of the page, but it doesn't seem like to be like a easy job, and it looks for me like a source of a lot of issues. So basically, we have to deal with it, and that's okay. It's Magento. We are working this way, and it should be okay. But there is a plot twist, because when I was standing in the queue for the food on the Magento Poland, Anton approached me, and we started talking about making the front end faster. And he shows me this repository. It's about making the bundling, the JavaScript bundling better, faster, and really something that people should use. So to do this, we will use the RJX. RJX is a optimization tool for the required JS. From given configuration, it will create us the bundles, and the bundles will be compatible with the rest of the required JS. So the entry point, this one is on Magento 2.2. And the performance index is exactly the same as before. It's 53. And that's Anton's idea. So manually create the configuration for the RJX to define basically what kind of bundles do we need, what should be the content of the bundles, then create them, and load the bundles using the layout instruction. So it will mean that the bundle will be loaded synchronously with rest of the JavaScript code. And as you can imagine, loading synchronously, I don't know, like 800 kilobytes of the JavaScript, it's not a best idea. And we can see that the score is pretty similar to what we get when we enable the bundling inside of the Magento itself. But if we improve this idea a little bit, and we still use the RJX and the manually created config, create the bundle, but there is a little bit difference. So instead of loading the JavaScript synchronously using the layout instruction, we will extend the required JS configuration to define the bundles. So it will know that if some module it's already in the bundle, it should download the bundle instead of the module. So the bundle itself and all of the modules will be loaded asynchronously via required JS without any layout, additional layout instruction. And it turns out that the page becomes really fast. So without any other optimization that I did before, we get exactly same performance index just by making the bundling in the right way. So as you can see, the first meaningful paint and the first interactive are basically the same as the entry point, but the consistently interactive drops from the 90 seconds to about 7 seconds, which is a really cool thing. So as you can imagine, if we combine this better bundling with other performance optimization ways, we can basically expect that our performance index will be higher than 80, maybe the 85 or something like that. So this page might be considered as something fast, really. So that's the visualization of how the Magento after this optimization should look like. And of course, it's not everything. There is always a lot of other possibilities how to deal with the performance optimization. The first was mentioned by me before. So somehow parse the HTML output of the page, scrap all of the data mage in it, and all of the other stuff related to the required JS module initialization, put them somehow into the footer, and move the render blocking JavaScript into the footer also. As I said, it's a really hard thing, at least for me. I can't imagine to do this, but maybe someone will success with this idea. The second point will be to try use the HTTP push. But there is a little drawback because it works only for Apache, or you have to set up some additional Node.js proxy or whatever proxy just to use the HTTP push. It can be used to load the heaviest files. Of course, if we changed our mindset to using only the bundles, so maybe it will be worth to HTTP push the bundles or some kind of heavy images or style sheets. So it's the field that you have to experiment, because it may turn out that it will be really fast, but it may turn out that you will load something unnecessary or will be even maybe slower. The third thing is to use the broadly or the subfill. That's the new compression format. It's like a gzip, it's a lossless compression. They are not supported in every browser, but everything is based on the HTTP headers. So if your browser can't understand the broadly or the subfill, basically you will fall back to the gzip and you will be fine. It's really worth to try it out, because it will give you like a 10 or 20% reduce of the payload for every resource that you are compressing using the lossless algorithm. And the fourth point, which is kind of huge, and Bob was talking about this yesterday, is the service workers and everything related to this. So basically you can intercept each and every network request, cache them, write own policies on dealing with the network request. There is a lot of possibilities to deal with the service workers, but this talk is a little bit too short to talk about it. And the further reading, I have in my presentation like, I don't know, 50 or 20 points. In this article, there is, as far as I remember, like a 60 or something like that. It's a really good article to jump from the point to point and try to analyze your application, if it performs well or not. And it's way more knowledge than I am able to share in 1 hour. Of course, you can follow and contribute to the open source project that is built around of the idea of the performance optimization. The first one is the repository of Anton's Creel with the RJX configuration. The second one is a team that I created for the purpose of making all of this optimization. And you can expect that soon in the future, I will create a task in our Frontools module that will let you create this JavaScript bundles inside of the Frontools. So you will not really have to do this on your own, but just copy paste the configuration, maybe change something, add this task to your deployment process, and you will be ready to go with these bundles. And it will be pretty cool, but I'm not sure when I will have some time to do it. So it's a Q&A time. I think we have some time. So if you have any questions, feel free.
At what value should that performance score be so we can just go home and be happy about it?
Sorry?
You showed some performance scores. Yeah. When we should be happy? About what value? Please don't say 100, because that's like a unicorn, right?
Not really. There are some pages that have the 100 store.
Some pages, but yeah, when should I be happy enough to say, okay, I'm going home?
I think the score itself, it's not really a value. You have to focus on the numbers below. So keep the first point really low, so like 1 second or 1.5 seconds. There are also other metrics like performance indexed, when you have to define the budget. So in example, the good way of defining budgets is to target like 1,000 to 1,500. And it means to fit with the first render between 1 and 1.5 seconds. And these are really the goal. Of course, you have to keep all of the other metrics also low, like consistent interactive, because there is no point when the performance will be perfect or something like that. It's like continuous process that you have to do it over and over, and because for sure also the tools will change in the future. So something that is 100 right now, in the 2 years will not be 100 anymore.
Hi, does lazy loading images affect the way they are perceived by Google?
We don't see any drawbacks of using it.
Okay, thanks.
As far as we know, Google, if the page loads very slow, the Google search engine will give a lower rating in your searches. Do you know some values to have the?
I think you have to use the web speed insights that the Google shows you on the web, and try to keep this as high as possible, because I don't think there is a strict rule that, okay, your page should load faster than, I don't know, 4 seconds, otherwise it will be penalty in the SEO rankings or something like that. So just keep it as fast as possible, and check the score on the page speed insights, that it should be, I don't know, higher than 80 or 90, because the page speed insight is a different tool and the different measurements than the Lighthouse. Okay, more questions? If not, I
have a question.
Okay.
You know, we got some requirements from the clients that the code should be optimized for W3C coding standards, and we know that Magento is not very, close to that. And how do you manage that if you get such a requirement from a client?
To be honest, we never get this one, because for me it's kind of stupid, yeah, because I know that it's a good manner to keep all of the tags and the properties in the really strict order, but it really have no value for other things than just passing this W3C tests. Of course, it's a small part of these things that should be done because of the accessibility. But other than that, I think it's like some enterprisey thing, not really worth to be focusing on it. But
Okay.
I hope that there will be some brave men and girls who will try to change the Magento 2 core and make it W3C compatible, because it's a cool thing. Okay. So if there is no more question, I will just want to invite you to join the Hacktoberfest, because it's October. So that's the idea baked by DigitalOcean, where empowers you to help dealing with the open source projects. So the rules are pretty easy. So you have to submit the 4 pull requests, and you will get a cool T-shirt. That's the old one for, I don't know, 2015 or something like that. And that was the first time I was part in this project, and that was my first open source contributions ever. And right now I'm leading like 5 others open source projects. So that dumb way of just getting a free T-shirt can somehow change your life. So it's really worth to join this cool idea. So thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Yeah. If you have any question, you can catch me on the corridor. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.